Chico and the Man will not be presented this evening, and the Rockford Files will be seen 1 hour later than normal, so that we may bring you the following special program.
There we go. Can you hear me, kids? Sorry about that, everybody. I'm having obviously technical difficulties. I'm working on my end to improve my vision of everything, but we are live. Welcome back. It's Word Balloon, the Comic Book Conversation Show. John Suntress here. As I've said in the promotion for this episode, it's our favorite Bond girl, everybody, Shelly Bond. Welcome back, buddy.
The shortest Bond girl in history. At 5'6" in platforms, no less. It's not that funny.
Do you always wear platforms when you're at conventions and stuff?
I'm not going to admit to it in this court of law.
It's a safe space. Don't worry, Shell. I'm just trying to figure the few times I've actually seen you face to face, and I'm like, I know. And you always tell me, of course, your life as the littlest campfire girl, of course. I can't forget that. But yeah, I'm like, all right, and I do know. I mean, obviously, and that's great. Hey, man, it's just a number, Shell.
You have to make do with what you've got, right?
100%, absolutely. So
it's so good to see you, by the way. It's been a while. How have you been?
Well, the two of us, as we've been commiserating through text, you poor thing, and the whole family got COVID. I just got really serious con crud doing Connecticut and C2E2 back to back. So, but I'm fine now. I'm getting there.
That'll do it. Yeah. That'll do it. COVID is a peculiar blend of the worst con crud you can have times a billion. So yeah, finally tested negative yesterday, but it took out the House of Bond for at least 10 days. But happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me on again. It's always fun to catch up with you.
Shell, honestly, and you know this, and I'm not saying this for the purposes of the audience hearing this as well. We literally could do like our comic book version of Regis and Kelly and everything. Good Lord,
we could, we should.
Have you watched Sandman yet? I'm telling you, it's crazy. It's like absolutely crazy.
And we should talk about it today. I'm telling you, it was amazing. Oh my God, we will talk about it. But someone should pay us to do that on a monthly basis.
That's true.
Because we would kill it. And we would talk about music too. It would be 50-50 comics and music, and maybe 2% style.
Well, style? That's your 2% on. You know that. I'm a human hamper. Let's not kid ourselves. Come on.
I'm going to put that on a T-shirt for you.
The human hamper. Absolutely. Born to spill, born to wrinkle.
Hey, listen, you're talking to dry cleaner's daughter. So
really your dad was?
Oh, yeah.
That's awesome.
Oh no. Oh, he is. He's 84 years old, and he doesn't believe in the word retire.
Good for him.
Still working like a dog on a daily basis. In fact, if we're going to talk about Vertigo, I'll start with my favorite, most endearing story about my boss, who, by the way, works with Karen Berger, who, let's face it, she's the mastermind of Vertigo. And without her, I don't think a lot of us would be here in comics. So let's just start out by saying big props to Karen. But my favorite part of working for Karen over 20 years, I started as her assistant editor. But my favorite thing about her, and you know, I worked in tandem with her for all of those years, I wasn't big on taking sick days. Okay. Now, you would think that would be a good thing for an employee, right? When you're doing monthly comics.
Yeah.
And comics in those days, that was like a 24/7 kind of job. So every few years, I would be so deathly ill that I would feel like I earned the sick day. I was never worried about what my boss, Karen, would say. In fact, sometimes she would send me home. It was what my dad would say if he happened to call me at work and I had that voicemail answering machine message that would say, I'm out sick today. Please contact my assistant or please contact someone. So it was never about getting in trouble with Karen. It was always my dad who would call, you know, once in a while, but always on the one day every 5 years I would take off. And he'd call me at home and he would say, how sick could you possibly be? You don't miss work
I'm not
days.
hearing you. I don't know why. Hang on one second.
Basically, oh no, there's no audio today? Well.
Oh, I see. Hang on. My fault.
Okay. No problem. It's
There we go.
So
that was all me. Please continue.
Hey, listen, wherever we landed, the punchline of the joke is my dad would get the answering message that said that I'm not working that day. He'd call me at home. He'd say, what in the world are you doing at home? How sick can you be? And he would throw me that classic line, go to work anyway, you'll feel better by noon. So it was always that, you know, horrible moment of knowing I had to be really super sick. It wasn't the wrath of Karen, because believe me, she was always the kind of boss who would say, don't get everyone else sick, go home. But it was my dad who was such a ball buster. He would never, ever let me slip. So that I thought that was a good way to regale my early days at Vertigo. Really had a great boss. And I think some of the best days were those first few years when I actually had a chance to work with Karen on books like The Sandman and Shade the Changing Man and Sandman Mystery Theater, which I know is one of those books you love.
It truly was my favorite Vertigo title. Everybody on that, from Steve Siegel, of course Matt, of course Guy Davis. I don't remember who the alternate artist was when it wasn't Guy, but
we had quite a few. We had R.G. Taylor, we had John Watkiss. Oh, what a tremendous drafts person he was, graphic designer and illustrator. So many people. Vince Locke worked with us on that series. Terrific rotating cast of artists and characters, which are basically the same thing.
And just the basis of the story and the idea that Wesley Dodds was, you know, literally, he was literally one of the first heroes. But I really am fascinated by that very early DC period of Slam Bradley, Doc Occult, and all of these characters. I'm very excited. I'm sure you may have heard that Tom King and Phil Hester are going to do a prequel Gotham story where Slam, it's pre-Batman, and Slam is the main hero in it. And I love what Darwin and Brubaker and those guys did on Catwoman with Slam. I mean, it's, you know, it's like, no, these are the building block characters. And I really love the idea that, okay, they were doing it. And especially getting back to Sandman, Wesley and Diane. And, you know, obviously, and the way that Matt leaned into the Shadow Margot Lane sort of relationship.
Oh, loved that. Oh, Matt and Steve were just a powerhouse, you know, writing together on that series. And I was lucky enough to get to write the letter column which I believe I called in the crowd backstage.
Outstanding.
And it was a joy. It was a joy to work on that book. I mean, I'm not known to like a period piece. I mean, the only period pieces I love are 60s swinging London. So when I found out I was working on the book, I winced for about 10 seconds. I got a chance to work with Matt and Steve again, which was great because I worked with them a few years before that at Kamiko. So they were already friends.
Yeah.
Matt was my first crush. And in fact, in the book Fast Times, that I'm sure we'll talk about eventually.
Of course. Yes, please.
There's a story about Kamiko, and I confess on paper, and it's graphic. No nudity, I promise you. But there's a scene that I've depicted that Matt approved, that Diana Schutz, who was my boss and his boss, approved, that I told him he should show his wife. He said she's never going to see it. It's not a problem. Let's just say it was a kissing scene that happened in my head. And it was something I just had to commit to paper because it was so funny. Because I was a 21-year-old kid right out of college. I was like your quintessential goth girl. I mean, with super heavy black makeup, dyed black hair. Matt's Grendel got me into comics along with Love and Rockets. So when Matt would call the office, I would pick up the phone and say Kamiko, and I was sweating. I was just so nervous. And he was the nicest guy on the planet. And he called me Shell from the very beginning. And no one ever called me Shell. I was always Shelly. But he'd be like, hey, Shell, it's Matt. And like all of a sudden, every sound in the universe stopped. And my heart would just explode out of the chest. So I got Matt's permission. And he did approve the story. And it's a tiny, weeny bit exaggerated because although I found out that Matt Wagner was a local Philly guy, went to art school there, was youngish. You know, he was 28. I was 21. That was old enough. I thought I was mature. I wasn't, by the way. Well, I found out that he was Diana's sister's husband. So all bets were off. I was crushed. But Matt was so good to me. He was so good to me. He was one of those guys in the early days that did not mind questions from the neophyte. So I would ask him all kinds of questions about art and design because I studied film, as you know, and he was really into music. So you can only imagine, here I am, dream job at a college, big fan of Grendel, starting with issues 16 and 17, which were Matt's tribute to Kurtzman, and they were just phenomenal. But here's Matt talking to me like I'm a friend or a peer. And what is the one thing that took it up off the charts? What do you think it was?
It's got to be music. Or what, Roxy Music? Was it?
No,
not
Roxy Music.
The Jam?
Close. Yes.
Yeah.
He was a big fan of the Clash and the Jam. I lost my shit. But I got over myself. Because I had to, because there was no way I was going to keep my job and get the guy because he was married to the boss's sister. And I was good with that.
I'm hip. Absolutely.
I capped it and I moved on. I was like, I can get over this. But to this day, I blush when I'm in his company and I still love him like a big brother.
You know, Gene Ha at a Orlando convention introduced me to Matt and Dave Johnson at the same breakfast, and immediately, like the entire weekend, we were just like running into each other and everything was great. And don't get me wrong, I like Dave a lot too, and a great guy, and it's always been great to me. But knowing that Matt, and this is early, this is like 2008. I'd been doing Word Balloon for like 2 years or whatever, but it did like tickle me that like Matt after that would be like, John, how are you? Hey, let's talk. And I'm like, okay, good, please. Because, yeah, he's amazing, man. And even, you know, to this day, he's just a great guy.
He is legit, genuine, cool guy. And tells it like he sees it. And I respect people that do that. I was raised by, you know, a guy who was a straight shooter. So I don't know how to be any other way than how I am. And Matt is the same way. You know, if there was a problem on a book, you know, like sometimes Matt did not agree with the proofreader's note, which was fine. You know, sometimes our proofreaders at DC were very pedantic, and I love them. And in fact, Arlene Lowe continues to be my freelancer for all my books.
Okay.
She's amazing. However, Matt came from the Burroughs school of sometimes, you know, creating your own parlance. And I'm with him on that, especially in a period piece. So there was sometimes a little bit of a tug, but he was hands down one of the top 5 people who helped me get to where I am in comics. So I will always adore him, even if he wouldn't drop everything and marry me and move back to Philly.
I want to point out the snark of our mutual friend Gail Simone, who asks, Matt Wagner did Concrete, right? Nice.
Gail,
nice.
She's getting herself in trouble already. Gail, magic is green. Just remember that, or you're going to be in big trouble when you see Matt at a convention.
Hilarious. I'm dying.
I love that Gail Simone is here. She's going to be our heckler, isn't she?
No question. No question. I know. Again, seriously, everyone, and I'm really worried about the bad karma that's waiting for me on the other end. But this year has really been a ridiculously very nice year. I was telling you, and you're aware, my college radio station put me in their Hall of Fame. God, I just a couple weeks ago, Podcast Magazine did an article about 40 podcasters over 40, and I'm on the list.
What? Wait a minute, you're over 40? I would have never guessed you were over 40.
Thanks, sweetie. Thank you.
Look 30. Yeah, look 39.3 to me.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Jack Benny. Exactly. I'm 39.
Right.
I know. I was telling Bendis, I'm like, how do I break it to him that I'm 3 years from being on the 60 over 60 list? You know.
Ooh.
But I am like, you know, technically, all right, sure, I am over 40. All right. So, but yeah, I'm like, and Gail was very sweet, and you know, even like before all these accolades, is, you know, just like glowing about me on Twitter. And right now, I know she's flipping off the screen, saying, "Shut up, John." And I understand that's okay. But really, honestly, it is like the greatest compliment when everybody not only comes back and is on camera like we are right now, but like Haspiel, Nick Barucci from Dynamite, Brian, Gail, so many others will just like pop in the chat and see that, like, you know, who I'm talking to, be like, hey. So obviously they're here for you, Shell. They're not here for me. You know that.
Oh, I don't know about that. I think they're here for you. I think that everybody knows that once a year you tell a story that brings me to my knees. We'll save that for later because we have an important announcement to make about Brian Ferry.
Yes.
However, that's the story that sometimes people come to hear, because that story will never get old. And every time you tell it, I still get goosebumps.
You're so cute. Let's talk about your book. Let's talk about your Kickstarter, because how much time left in the campaign?
Well, we have 7.5 days.
Oh, good. Okay, good.
We've been doing great. COVID didn't help. It kind of threw a wrench into my schedule, but not too badly. You know, a lot of people waited to get COVID. You know, like my husband and son and I have been masked up for 2.5 years. We are hermits. We are the crazy people at the grocery store still wearing the masks, use the gloves when necessary, and, you know, don't even go to San Diego Comic-Con. Enjoyed myself from CouchCon. We still get the COVID. So put a little bit of a wrench into the campaign, but we're doing quite well. And I want to give a big shout out to all the backers so far. We have about 43K, which is amazing.
Wow, that's great.
I know, it's exciting, but I did something a little different this year. Rather than doing a ton of paper or plastic or sticker stretch goals, like these, I decided to do experiences. So my stretch goals are team reunion videos where I somehow bribe 5 teams from books I edited back in the day. I mean, Gail Simone was probably about 10 when Vertigo started, or maybe 8. So she might not remember these guys. But we've got the Lucifer team, Peter Gross and Mike Carey.
Outstanding.
Heavy Liquid's Paul Pope, who is the rock star darling of comics, or like I like to call him, my kid brother, because we're born on the same day. One of us is 4 years younger. I know. He's my birthday mate. And we're Bowie twins. And also we have Sandman Mystery Theater, which I know you're going to want to see. So get back in, because it's Matt Wagner, it's Stephen T. Siegel, and surprise guest artist coming in for that one.
Ooh.
So we've got the Invisibles coming up. Grant Morrison said he would reunite a special cell of Invisibles operatives, including Chris Weston, my husband, the great Philip Bond. And by the way, the reason I'm married is Grant's fault, and I'm going to tell all in the book. But we also, if we reach 50K, it's the granddaddy of them all, the king of dreams. I'm not sure if Gail Simone's going to know the answer to this question. Begins with an S, ends with a man. It's the Sandman. And Neil Gaiman has agreed to do the 1 hour reunion team video with Todd Klein and a bunch of other superstars like Jill Thompson. So get back in, because we can only do them if we crush the stretch goals.
Okay, so they like private? They're going to be like a private Zoom that people can watch, basically?
Basically, it's going to be like this. There are 5 1 hour recorded Zoom chats. The backers will submit questions to me. I'll moderate. And it's going to be a very Vertigo binge watch before Christmas.
That's
so
great.
It's going to be 5 hours of your favorite people in comics, except for Gail Simone, because she was too young to be writing comics in 1992, or so I've heard.
Well, she points out she did write Clean Room, and that was a Vertigo series that she did before they shuttered Vertigo.
It sounds familiar, but I'm going to have to go back to that question later and phone a friend.
You're killing, literally.
Working with Gail on Clean Room was one of the greatest joys of those final fateful years of my time at Vertigo, because she is awesome. We tease her ruthlessly, but she deserves it. And I love her, even though it took me many years to find out that her David Bowie album is her favorite David Bowie album, is my second favorite David Bowie album.
Which one?
Aladdin Sane.
That's cool. That's all right. She could stay. All right.
I'll give that one to her. She can't.
I love all. I know I've told you this, or I'm reasonably certain. Last commercial radio job before doing traffic reporting, last music job I had, I worked at The Drive, which was an album rock station. And in 2015, when Black Star came out, his final album, and I'm like haranguing our program director, and I'm like, why aren't we playing this? And he's like, well, we're a classic rock station. I'm like, yeah, Bowie's classic rock, and it's new. Why aren't you acknowledging? And I go, and it's fucking brilliant. Well, we like playing the old hits. I'm like, yeah, goodbye. I'm like, that's why you suck.
Whack,
you know, yeah, exactly. It's like, come on, man, don't waste my time. But God damn it, what a brilliant man, Jesus Christ. Oh yeah, there you go. Gail is acknowledging Aladdin Sane. Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, Gail, I think it was you on Twitter saying like you appreciated hearing people speak and say characters' names because people would get them wrong. And I remember Bendis and I talking about Paladin from Marvel, and he was pronouncing it Paladin like Aladdin. And I'm like, no, man, Paladin, like, you know, like a knight, have gun will travel, you know, the Western and stuff. I think Paladin. And I'm like, all right, whatever, you know. But, you know, and again, I don't know who's right, who's wrong, but, you know.
But did he say it was because of his love for Aladdin Sane?
Well, I doubt it.
Because we might give him a free pass if that's
all right, fair enough. I understand.
We'll have to phone him later.
I think Scary Monsters is my favorite Bowie album.
All right. 1980 was a great year for everyone but me. That's the year that I was bullied in summer camp.
Aw.
I know. Boo hoo hoo. But
again,
you know what?
You know.
What I will say to you about Fast Times is it covers my life in the 90s, but we go a little bit before and a little bit after the decade for a couple of reasons. I know you were a huge fan and supporter of Filth and Grammar, and I thank you for that.
Of
We
course.
talked about it a lot on the show. You backed the book. So basically, when I wrote Filth and Grammar, I didn't realize there were going to be interludes that illustrated my life in comics. I didn't know that until I met Jen Mangle, and she's such a tremendous artist. I started to get bored with my prose cadence, so I decided to start writing comics, and that was one of the reasons why there are interludes in Filth and Grammar, which is technically, I think, an educational resource. Fast Times is the opposite of that. So if you look at Filth and Grammar, which, by the way, I have right here.
I see it right there. Very nice, Carol Merrill.
It's the comic book editor's secret handbook. It's the book I didn't have when I was coming up in the 90s as a young comic book ingenue editor. And it's my favorite pro tips, tricks of the trade. And I included about a dozen of the creators who were kind enough to pull me along with them and share their trade secrets.
Sure.
Fast Times is the opposite ratio of that book. It's 20% editing tips from me because I can't help myself. It's what I do. I just edit people. But it's 80% convention antics, what it's like to work in an editorial office surrounded by, well, boys club, to be fair, and a lot of nice guys. So it is, when I tell you it's a love letter to New York City, it's a love letter to being in my 20s, to start pretty much, elevating my career. I started in comics in '88, so we do cover a little bit of the Kamiko years. I always thank Diana Schutz because she gave me my first job in comics. But when I landed at Vertigo, that's really when my life began. It was nothing like Sex and the City, and it was nothing like Friends. So don't ask me about that. But it was better than that because I had to disrupt my life in 2 weeks. I was told to have the job. I had to move to New York City in under 2 weeks to get started in the middle of December 1992. So basically, my mom and I walked a 6-block radius around the DC Comics offices. We took the cheapest apartment in Hell's Kitchen because my dad wasn't with us. Because Hell's Kitchen back in those days was not a great place to live. That's why they called it hell. So
now Clinton, New York. Yeah, right? It's before they gentrified Hell's Kitchen. Absolutely.
And my mom always wanted to live in New York, but instead of actually moving to the big city, she married her dream guy and started having kids. So I knew she was the right person to take to New York with me because she was like, we're moving to New York. We are going. We're going to be living there. And of course, I was like, eye roll, like, what's with the we? But she helped me make it possible. And so that's why I'm dedicating Fast Times to my mom. Filth and Grammar was dedicated to my dad just because I wanted to show him, like, why I worked how I worked my ass off, just as he trained me all these years in comics. Like, this is what I do. Because he was always proud of me, but I never quite got the impression that he understood what I did from day to day, hour to hour. That book was for him. But Fast Times is for my mom because it's also fun times in the big city. It's like dance clubs. Webster Hall was a place we used to go to a lot. It was live shows. John, I know we've talked about this, but I lived on the same block as Roseland Ballroom. So
wow.
I mean, it was so cool. So there were nights I'd walk home at 10:30 at night, really pissed off for whatever reason, right? Maybe there was a typo in a book, or maybe somebody was like really obnoxious to me. And I'd walk by the stage door and I could hear like Robert Smith doing a sound check. And I would just be frozen at the time, right? So it was just magical. And the fact that I was able to procure an apartment that enabled me to live and work 24/7 in comics, that's how I got to where I am now. Because I just busted my butt. And whenever I was at a convention or when I was in the office, I always did my job, but I was always available to help other people too. And I still think that's the number one advice I give people. Show up and do the job and pay it forward. Always be respectful and be grateful. And when you get the opportunity, even on your worst days, you'll feel better if you give someone else a compliment. So I had this thing where I used to, once a week, I would call someone or I would write someone a note and tell them why I think their work was great. So it was a way for me to meet people, sometimes my contemporaries who I didn't know well. Maybe Karen was working with like a real, hot shot artist who I would work with one day. Well, it didn't cost me anything to pay them a compliment if I read their work. I was a big Bill Sienkiewicz fan as a teenager. I discovered Electra Assassin and Stray Toasters on those early days at the comic book store in the late 80s. So working with Bill was just like major career goal. And also one of the coolest, nicest guys in comics to this day. Also one of the people I can put on one hand to say, hey, greatest people in comics. Lucky to know them.
100%, buddy. I'm the same way. I'm so bummed. I was sick as a dog this weekend, and he was in town doing a gallery show at one of the suburban Chicago museums, the Dunn Museum.
Nice.
And Sal Abenati, who reps Bill and everything, has only made me closer to Bill. And yeah, Bill's one of those guys that, again, mentioning San Diego, I would see him on preview night before the doors would open. And it's like, John. And I'm like, oh, Bill, I'm so glad you're saying hello. And again, I being a fan and reading as I did, and just like you, Electra Assassin, the Daredevil stuff, the Batman stuff over the years. And it's like, God, it is so nice that Sienkiewicz knows and likes me. And it's like, oh, that's such a compliment. I'm like, oh my God, that's amazing. So I know what you mean.
It says a whole lot about his character. And the other thing about Bill that
yes,
so few people know, Bill is such an incredible writer. And I see it now, now that we have social media platforms, I think on Facebook, say what you want about Facebook and Twitter, and they can be vile cesspools of information, but they can also be places where you realize that other people in the industry who might not be known for their writing actually shine. And Bill is one of those people. I mean, he posted something about 9/11 last year, and he inspired me to write something back. And 9/11 is something that I experienced firsthand. And in fact, one of the reasons why Fast Times is about the 90s, but kind of goes into 2002, was because I couldn't work my way from 88 up until the new millennium without capturing that overarching fear of what's going to happen at the turn of the century. But then also, once we got over that hump and we realized it was Disco 2000, 9/11 happened, and it was pretty crappy for quite a while to be living and working in New York City. It was tragic and it was sad. And that day in particular taught me a lot about life and death from when I walked into the office, and Paul Levitz, who was the president of the company at that time, pretty much had the news on, and everybody was in a conference room, and he said, everybody, if you don't know what's going on, please go home, be with your loved ones. Horrible things are happening in this world. So I wasn't sure when I was going to write about that, and Bill's remembrance coaxed it out of me, and I'm glad I did. Because again, there's certain things that you hold in your heart, but eventually the best way to get them off your chest is to put them down. And I think it's also the reason why I've started to capture my experiences in book form, because I spent 30 years, I hope, helping other people tell the stories in their hearts and heads, and helping artists too. Because let's just face it, the reason I'm in this job as a comic book editor is because I like to art direct. So you can take away my red pen, you can take away my copy editing hat, and you can take away my script autopsy skills. I'm the art director. That's what I want to die with art director on my tombstone, because that's the most important part of comics for me.
I had Matthew Klickstein on the show last night, and we were talking about the full history of Comic-Con, really going back to the early '70s, when not only was it a bunch of teenage nerds putting this show on, but also the people. Comic-Con and comic books, as you well know, Frank Miller calls it an outlaw medium. It absolutely is, and
Mm,
it's like you forget. It's easy to forget the underground comics and the hipsters that were part of comics, but also San Diego. And it's like, I don't know how to break it to everyone, because, in fact, my older cousins would laugh at me when I'd be like going to San Diego, and they'd be watching the news, and literally the newscaster would be the San Diego Comic Con, otherwise known as the Nerd Prom. And it's like, John's going to the Nerd Prom. I'm like, the Nerd Prom? You mean where, like, Frank Zappa and your favorite underground filmmakers and Gilbert Shelton and all these, like, hipsters, George
and
Clayton
Gilbert
Johnson,
Hernandez, right?
Gilbert, and
And
of
Gilbert
course, yes,
Hernandez,
Gilbert and Jaime,
right?
absolutely. I mean, all these amazing hipsters that
Yep,
were groundbreaking in their various mediums. And it's like, yeah, I don't know how to break it to you, but this is where all the influencers and cool kids were. And that's
yep.
could easily get forgotten with Hall H and the mainstream. And of course, DC and Marvel. And I'm a massive DC and Marvel fan. But truly, as you point out, being an art director at Vertigo was that kind of laboratory. That's
Right.
where, as we got older, and especially someone that had been reading comics since I was 4 or 5, when I could read, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, wait a minute, this isn't, and nothing wrong with High and Lois or Dennis the Menace or whatever Sunday Funny you loved. It's like, this is really groundbreaking storytelling with beautiful art,
Yeah.
amazing writers. Nobody's laughing anymore in the best way. And it's like, no, this is really great literature. And thank God the mainstream is kind of finally starting to catch up. And that's why mentioning Sandman, even in particular, especially with the Netflix series being
Yeah.
out now and stuff, it's like, no, people get it now. People really understand
Thank
the
God.
cool side of comics as
I,
well as the superhero stuff.
well, and I just said it. Thank God, because we
Yeah.
have been supporters of this incredible movement for years and years. And it is really humbling now to finally see Sandman next Netflix getting the attention it deserves. I know you're laughing at Gail Simone and not
I
me,
am
by the
laughing.
way.
I'm sorry, real fast for the audience. She said High and Lois got into some very dark stuff and also deeply erotic stuff. Yes, who could forget the group orgy that High and Lois hosted in that one Sunday spread? Indeed.
Oh
Go ahead.
dear.
I'm sorry,
I'm
buddy.
glad I wasn't into that stuff. That would frighten me. But no, the Sandman, I'm beyond thrilled about the Sandman Netflix. And the response it's getting is deserved. I know that Sandman was around before I entered the Vertigo equation. I was the last editorial hire in December of '92, but I didn't start working on Sandman until Sandman 46. So Karen and Neil and Dave McKean, they had all been working on Sandman that as part of Burger Books, because Karen's imprint basically, were horror and dark fantasy books that had social and political leanings, which were amazing because they were intelligent. I mean, really, it was genre fiction before the term was coined. And so those books sort of dovetailed and began with Vertigo. But Neil was a superstar, so when I walked in, he was already writing books, and I'm sure he was starting his movie career. And, in addition to continuing the Sandman mythos, which, by the way, what I love so much is that as Sandman grew and developed, we just kept making more retail products. We kept making bigger and more beautiful albums. So I'm really proud to say that I was a part of so many of the really cool merchandising, which I have right here. Gail Simone will find this absolutely stunning, but this is part of an endless pewter set designed by Teddy Christensen. And what was great is I came in at a time where people like me, 20 something goth girl, I would actually wear the t-shirts that we made because, you know, they were Chris Pacello images of death. We were doing all kinds of jewelry. We did what we called cloisonne pins back in the day. And now I guess they're called, you know, they have a different name, but, you know, we started this whole trend, you know, and it evolved into Hot Topic. I think the goth aspect of Sandman kept growing, and then we were able to do things on a grander scale. You know, for instance, we did these beautiful deluxe editions, and Neil finally got his, he always wanted a set of the original Sandman books in a slipcase, and he always wanted a chess set. And so I have to say that one of the greatest accomplishments I think I had was I was a part of Vertigo during the years that Neil got to realize the chess set towards the end, and I've got pictures, and it's cool. And I was there when we finally got that amazing slipcase, because that helped people understand that the Sandman was a sophisticated comic.
Absolutely.
It was not about punching people. We all know I'm not a superhero fan, although I'm going to give props to my favorite people who do Grand Design. Jim Rugg, Hulk Grand Design, he's killing it. And I read, you know, I got into Grand Design because of Ed Peace Corps. So
yes,
love those guys. And a big shout out to the book Kirby, which also enlightened me about Jack Kirby's history.
Is that
so,
Evan,
you know,
Evan Year's? Is that Evan Year's book, Kirby?
No, actually not. And I'm hating myself for forgetting the cartoonist who did the book, and I apologize. It's the COVID Brain, but
No
10
problem,
Speed Press put it out, and I love him, and I apologize.
Oh, I love 10 Speed Press. They're great people.
I go in and out of superhero books, but only with a Milligan All Red combination. So Ecstatics was my jam, and I'm reading The Excellent. You know, you tell me that All Red and Milligan are doing something, I'll admit that it was my fault, because I put them together for the first time on a shade story in Winter's Edge in 1995. And it's Tom Scioli, Brian Weaver. I love you for that.
Thanks,
Tom
Brian.
Scioli. I love him. It's COVID Brain. And also, I'm a little bit older than John. I mean, I'm a little bit older than Gail Simone.
I was going to say, no, you're not.
22. I'm a little bit older than Gail Simone. I know that for a fact.
I understand. You know, yeah, if Gail, if you're still watching, I don't mind doing the Brian Ferry story now, just so you get to watch it, because you've never heard it. You know, this is my this is like you know, me being Leonard Skinner and somebody screaming Freebird, and Shelly's the fan that wants to hear Freebird, and it's like, all right, here we go. So this is in the 90s. I worked at my rock radio station WXRT, and I've said it a million times, and I mean it. It was the greatest radio job I ever had, because every day, I should say every month, to be honest, somebody from music would walk in, and it's like, oh, look, Sean Colvin is here today, and she's playing live. Oh, there's Robbie Robertson. Hey, look, it's Boz Scaggs. Hey, Elvis Costello is here. Hey, John, do you mind sitting next to Lyle Lovett while he sings like 5 songs for us? John Hyatt, Ray Davies, all these amazing people. So I also worked at the sports talk station at the same time, and it's a Saturday night. I'm producing a sports show, and the back entrances to both radio stations were like in an L shape of 2 different doors in the back parking lot. So invariably, someone would knock on the door. God, it was like watching a Laugh-In rerun. I know I'm aging myself, but oh, hey, look, everybody, it's Trini Lopez. Oh, Trini, why don't you come on in? Whatever. So there's a knock at the door on the sports side. I walk up and I open it, and there is Brian Ferry, looking like he just stepped off a music video set. I believe he might have been playing later that night. I don't really remember. But he cut, and then that beautiful voice of his, he's like, hello, is Terry here? Meaning Terry Hemmert, one of our music DJs. And I'm like, Brian, come in, please. My God. And I said, hold on. And Terry's like barreling down the hallway. I got this, John. I got this. Thank you very much. Brian, and escorts him out. And I'm like, hey, awesome, man. I just met Brian Ferry. This is amazing. So there you go, everybody. There's the.
I want to know 2 things. Like, I love the fact that, because this is why I like hearing the story 5 times, because I'm waiting for the day where Terry says to you, John, don't worry, I've got this, and she slips on a banana peel. And you're like, no, you don't, Terry.
Yeah,
I got it now. Brian.
You know, exactly
we'll
my studio. I'll interview you. You know what's great?
A cocktail, and you'll bring a bandolier this time.
I think I texted you this show last month. Chris Thompson, the great one of the great marketing guys in comics, arranged for through his publishing company, Joe Satriani, the great guitar virtuoso, and it's like, hey man, he's making a sci-fi graphic novel. Would you like to interview him? And I'm like, finally, man, my worlds are colliding. My love of music and comics and sci-fi, boom. And it was so great. And we talked for an hour. He couldn't have been cooler. And as you know, Musician Magazine, even more so than Rolling Stone, was really one of those interview templates that have always been cooking in my mind when I do word balloon interviews. And in college, and this is one of the reasons why Shell and I are symbiotic this way. We both work stations, and it just meant heavy rotation, right? Shell, isn't that your book about college radio?
Yes.
Yeah. So I mean, really, it's like, oh my God, I've been preparing for an interview like this my entire life. Fantastic. And it was so great. And the only thing that could have been better was if, along with playing the guitar, Satriani were an athlete of some sort, and then all of my worlds completely would have collided. But yeah, it was great. I've been very fortunate that way. Got a guy that I'm going to shame him because we will do this. Billy Mooney's collaborator on Barnes and Barnes. Remember Fish Heads, Roly Poly Fish Heads?
Oh,
that
sure.
terrible novelty song. He is the John Oates to Billy Mummy's Daryl Hall in Barnes and Barnes. Richard is his name, and I'm forgetting Richard's last name. But he out of the blue was watching.
It's not Scioli.
Doing the it's not Des like Tom Scioli. Yes. All right, call back.
Richard's last name is not Scioli.
It's not Scioli. No, and he didn't write a Kirby book.
I just need to know if Gail Simone needs smelling salts, and if so, can somebody get them for her? If she's still with us, Gail Simone.
I don't know if she is or not. I'll text her later and say I hope you heard the story, and if not, she can. Hey, guess what? You can rewind if you didn't stick around. Too bad.
That's true.
I'm teasing. That was lovely that you were on, Gail, for as long as you hung out and everything. And again, I know you're here for Shelly. It's all good. She gets.
I know you're
here
for John. I know you're here for John, and it's all good.
Liar. It's all right. It's all right. I always tell my friends who are like, "Oh, it's been a while since I've heard your podcast." I'm like, "We're friends. You hear me talk enough. You don't need to listen to it." It's the same goddamn thing. Aren't you annoyed with me already? Good Lord. Come on.
I think people love hearing your stories, even if they are the same stories. And somebody, I'm so happy. Kaylee Giorgio just said that she's forever rocking her heavy rotation sticker on her car. I love her for that. And I love her because she supports all my work. I have to say, I feel lucky that I have such a great community of people who get what I'm trying to do in comics. And you're one of them. I thank you for that.
Of course.
I mean, music and comics, right? I mean, what could be better? And we're just trying to keep the dream alive through crowdfunding.
No, I hear you. But and truly, this is one I love too. And God, you had a cup of coffee with IDW with Black Crown, and I'm really glad they gave you that forum and platform for as long as they did as well. And you brought back not only some of your favorite Vertigo people like Pete Milligan, like Berto Hernandez and people like that.
Wait. Did you just say that Peter Milligan was one of my favorite Vertigo people?
Isn't he?
Nerd. He's just a big nerd. But go on.
No, but I'm saying that, yeah, obviously. But truthfully, that now, as it's like, okay, we're in the same boat, Shell, and there's nothing wrong with that, where the people that are publishers, or in my case, radio people that are handing out, payroll checks and everything, it's like, we're gonna deal with other people, whatever. Fine. We have taken our audiences. We continue to make the things we want to make. No one is stopping us, and thank God we've got audiences that appreciate what we do.
Hey, and let me rewind for a minute, because you mentioned Black Crown, you mentioned Peter Milligan, and I have to mention the other part of the Black Crown Peter Milligan equation, and it's Tess Fowler. Now, I'm not sure if she's shown up tonight, but she threatened to. Tess Fowler is the first person that I hired to work on Filth and Grammar, even though she only has one illustration in the actual Filth and Grammar book. That is because she did some beautiful sequential work. She is a superb cartoonist. She writes and draws in her own right, but she did some brilliant work for me. She was the first person I hired in 2016 to start illustrating some of my stories. But her stories were better suited for Fast Times. And so we also, at that time, I wasn't sure what Filth and Grammar was going to be. It was leaning towards a graphic memoir, and I don't think I was ready to write it, in all honesty. I pulled Tess along with me to Black Crown. I introduced her to Peter Milligan because the whole ethos of Black Crown was the imprint exists on a high street, and all the people I'm going to hire, I'm going to actually bring a veteran comic book creative and a newcomer.
Yes.
And put them in a room and see what happens. And what happened on paper was brilliant. 10 trades later, but you never forget your debut book. And Kid Lobotomy by Peter Milligan and Tess Fowler did everything I hoped it would do. It was a statement of intent. It was weird. It was warped. It was unlike anything you've ever read from Peter, which is saying a lot because he is one surrealistic madman. And Tess stepped up and just delivered with each and every ink brush on every single page. So loved working with them. When Black Crown shuttered, I knew I wanted to continue working with Tess. And it did take us a few years to kind of come back together at the right time. But she's killing it on her work for Fast Times. I love her to pieces. She is one of the great ambassadors of comics right now. There's no one more enthusiastic about comics. There's no one that helps the younger generation, and there's no one who is paying it forward for the rest of us who sometimes get cranky and who are a bit embittered, as we should be. She is the one saying, we got this. Let's just make comics on our terms. And so I'm like, okay, let's do it. Here we are.
Well, we got to, she left us some
great
questions.
Now she's given us a question. She also put a Kid Lobotomy figure on her avatar tonight.
Oh,
she's
adorable.
Also a great
She's it is.
Marketed herself well. Look at that.
Yeah, I see it. That's fantastic. So she wants to know what you're.
Fact.
Please continue. Yes.
No, I was going to say, here's a fun fact.
Yeah.
Tess modeled Kid Lobotomy, not after Peter Milligan, which is what I think Peter Milligan thought, but she modeled him after a young Mick Jagger.
Interesting.
And I said, aces to that.
I like that.
Go ahead, read the question.
Yeah, she's got a couple for you. What is your favorite comic you worked on in your Vertigo days? You want to take them piece by piece? So start there. What's your favorite comic you worked on in Vertigo?
I'm going to make a lot of enemies if I answer that question.
Shoot a list. You can do more than one.
You know what? Okay, so got lots of favorites because I play favorites. And in fact, I was juggling so many books at one time. When I would go away to a convention or on vacation, I would label my parting note to my freelancers as "Dear Favorite Freelancer," and I would just BCC everybody. And it's because I had to.
Sure.
Look, there were so many reasons to love every book I worked on. I was living a charmed life, okay? We all know why I liked working with Matt Wagner, because he's just a badass writer and illustrator. I loved working on The Invisibles because it was just so freaking cool. I wasn't the first editor on The Invisibles. That was Stuart Moore. So I was a fan. And I was a Doom Patrol reader when Grant and Richard Case pretty much taught me everything I needed to know about, like, editing and reading and understanding comics. Because I thought Doom Patrol was a masterclass in how to do a self-contained issue. Because half the time I would grab an issue and I didn't have all the issues, but I would sit down and read an issue. And even if I didn't understand any of the psychology or any of the psychodrama, I just fucking loved it because these were people I wanted to hang out with, and they were all misfits like me.
Yes.
So I think what Grant did well is he introduced very heady concepts. He brought them down to our level. And just when we thought we understood them, he kicked us in the head. And I loved that about him. I felt like, honestly, I felt cooler and smarter every time I read Doom Patrol. So yeah, I was a super fan. And so working on the Invisibles was it was a moment where I just was like, the stars popped out of my eyes, and I pretended to be very cool, but it was a big deal for me. So I got to relaunch volumes 2 and 3, and I got a husband out of it. So that has to be my favorite book because I was able to convince Philip Bond, who was known as a slacker freelancer in those days, because he didn't draw very often. He would draw to get enough money to go to the pub, but I convinced him to not only finish a pretty long run for him on the Invisibles, but then I tricked him into falling in love with me, which may or may not have been partly Grant's fault because Grant was practicing white magic. Now my husband is upstairs right now. He's heard this story 100 times. He might walk by and throw something at me.
That's all right.
And I deserve it because that story I've told more often than you've told the Brian Ferry story.
I loved when we did that summertime during the first year of Comic-Con in lockdown, and the Bensons and Tom King, and we arranged this whole big 4 or 5 hour hangout, and you were a big part of it. Yes, it was John Con. Thank you, sweetie. You're absolutely right. But the best was I loved you're talking up a storm, and Philip's just in the background, just hunched over, just drawing. Yep. And he's there, and he's definitely listening to the conversation or not. But I just love that it's just like, yeah, whatever. All right,
yeah. Well, he's also shy, and you wouldn't expect that from the tallest guy in the room, but we had a great time at John Con. Is there going to be another John Con?
Yeah, I'll find a reason at some point. That's the kind of thing. It really was such a spontaneous happening. And I think you too. I mean, it was my first time talking to Chris Cantwell, and it was great hearing you rave about *Halt and Catch Fire*. And I love the show too. God. And that show speaks to us because it's our favorite music. The soundtrack and everything.
Well, just promise me that if you have another John Con, you hire me to design the T-shirt.
Oh my God, Shell, seriously, like I love, and if I didn't have so much trouble showing graphics, let alone comments right now, I would be showing like all the stuff because what you've did you draw that thing for Fast Times, or did Philip? I mean, of you with the red pen in your mouth and everything.
Well, no, that illustration is by Jen Mangle.
Great.
So Jen did work for Filth and Grammar, and she's also joined me again for Fast Times. But if I may,
please,
I have been doing a lot of design work on these projects and designing some of the swag.
Yeah.
So, now, but back to the questions, because Tess has asked some terrific questions, and I like her question about crowdfunding.
Yes, please. So why did you choose Kickstarter over the other crowdfunding platforms? And there certainly are more in competition. GoFundMe, for example. Yeah, plenty.
Yeah, there's a new one called Crowdfunder that it's actually not new. Yeah, Crowdfunder actually looks really great. So I did a little research about them. They have been around since 2009, but they were a non-profit company. And they've only recently gone into the comic book and graphic novel space. I believe about 5 months ago, they started with a few campaigns. And so I highly recommend that people check their site out because they're doing things a little bit different than Kickstarter. They are not involved with NFTs, which I know was a big, not something that a lot of people want to get involved with, right?
Not really.
So they are a definite alternative to Kickstarter. I went back to Kickstarter because they've done right by me so far. And I started in 2016 with Femme Magnifique. And in fact, that was the first work that Tess and I worked on together. it was the first time I actually asked Tess to write me a story, and she saluted her favorite female icon. Kickstarting in 2016 was a completely different landscape. I mean, now it's the Wild West, but I felt like at that time it was really a great place for indie creators. And so I did enjoy it. And I kind of went back many times, as you know. And so I really do like the platform for a project like the one I'm doing now, because you're able to grow your audience and they get used to the way that the Kickstarter is set up. So there isn't like a learning curve. So it's handy for that reason. And it's reliable for that reason. So, you know, once you get used to something, it's easier for people to come back and support you. However, I do think that if you have projects that are going to different markets, or you have projects that maybe need a different amount of money, you know, let's say you're not making a book, but you're crowdfunding an experience. Let's say, John, you want to do a recording of yourself singing your favorite Brian Ferry song. You know, just for Gail Simone's birthday, you only need about $100. You know, Crowdfunder is a site, like they handle as much as you want to raise, but I have noticed that they have smaller targets too, you know, where it's not all or nothing. You can actually go on Crowdfunder and you can keep it going until you're ready to stop.
Okay.
The campaign. So there are lots of differences. But I do think that no matter where you go, what you need to remember is you have to deliver on your promises. So crowdfunding is a lot like working at a dry cleaning plant, which brings us all the way back to my dad, who is the greatest dry cleaner on earth and has done a lot to better the environment once we all found out how toxic those chemicals are. But that's another story for another time.
Wow. Okay.
But I do think customer service is huge in dry cleaning. And although I was tasked with the very glamorous job of sorting hotel laundry one summer, and it's not a fun job, customer service is the most important, because you're always going to have a complaints club. Dry cleaning was always expensive, will always be expensive. You will always have people upset if you break the buttons on their fancy sweater. Yeah. So you have to be good with people. And that's the number one thing I tell anyone who wants to do Kickstarter. You have to be able to be cool under pressure. You have to understand that if you're making a promise to deliver the goods, you better come through. And if you're running late, your audience deserves to know, and to know why. So throughout these pandemic years, I've been notorious for writing a lot of backer updates. And even my husband will tap me on the shoulder and say, how many backer updates are you going to do? And my response is, as many as I need to do to make sure that all the people that invested in me and my art know where they stand, and they know why perhaps I might be running late, which might be a paper chain or paper supply issue.
Sure.
Which, you know, I usually use a printer in Korea, and a lot of the people that worked for this particular printing press got sick with COVID at the same time. So the book that I was meant to deliver in March was delivered in June, and that sucked. But you better believe that when I found out that day, my backers found out too.
Understood.
So it's about being 100% full disclosure. You have to be communicative, and you have to also take criticism well. And that's just in life, and that's for any job you have. And there's something that I learned very recently. I took a TV writing class for fun, and it inspired me to teach a comics editing and self-publishing class, which, by the way, if any of my students from my June class are here, massive props to you guys. I had such a blast. I taught 4 Saturdays this summer, and then I had 4 Sunday sort of Q&As for an hour. But what I learned in my TV writing class is so true. And it's advice I'm going to give John if you ever get back into, if you become an editorial ingenue, and it's nod and take the note. Because most people that are giving you notes, especially when you're coming up in the business, they don't want to hear excuses like why you didn't catch it or why you don't understand it. For the most part, they're really busy doing their job. So just remember that if somebody is critiquing your work and they gave you their time, especially if it's for free, just take it in, like consider it, and then come back with your questions or then come back with a counter argument. It's such strong advice, and I guess it's a big piece of advice you learn in Hollywood. I took a TV writing class just for my own amusement. I have no big dreams of being a TV writer, but it was a really wonderful experience. And if anyone is watching, please, I implore you to look up a woman named Pilar Alessandra. She teaches a course called On the Page. It's very easy to find. It's incredible. Within 10 minutes, I was sold, and I wanted to give her more money. I mean, it was $250 for a 4-week class. It was nothing. The things I learned in those weeks are just priceless. So I implore everyone listening, if you want to be a writer of any kind, please take her class. Did I answer all of Tessa's questions?
Yeah, the other thing she wanted to know is about self-editing your creator own stuff. She wanted to know about that.
Self-editing is a tough thing. Everybody needs an editor, especially the comic book editor. Okay, and I had 2 on Filth and Grammar. Now, why did I have 2? I didn't fire one. What happened was I had an editor in the beginning who was amazing when it came to the big picture. She was a comics reader, but she was an English student. She taught high school English. She helped me on the broad, big picture angle. And I'm forever grateful to her because she helped me really shape it from the point of view of what is this book about? Is this book going to be a bittersweet memoir, or do I really want to make a book that exposes all of the great editorial tips and trials and tribulations on the page? That's when I realized I have to do 10 chapters from idea to execution. And that's when I knew what Filth and Grammar was going to become. The editor who helped me out probably 75% on the book is Will Potter, who I think is just one of the greatest writers, one of the greatest bass players. He's in the band Cud. Check out Cud. But he's a brilliant, brilliant editor because he helped me with the structure and he helped me really kick it into shape because the book was 300 pages when I thought it was done and everybody paid for 160. And if I would have given them 300 pages, I wouldn't be talking to you right now because I wouldn't be able to live in a house because that's how much it costs to make books. So everybody needs an editor, but the kind of editor you need can be different. So to answer Tessa's question, I think everybody needs a proofreader, and I think a proofreader is different than an editor. And I think your money is well spent when you have a comic book editor who handles both developmental, which is the front end, and the back end, which is structural, and which is catching typos, which is making sure you stay in the same tense, or shift tenses if that's part of the story. I mean, we do avant-garde books here. Vertigo was always known for more eclectic storytelling. So that's what I do in my personal work. So yeah, there's stuff that, maybe you do want something to be rather discordant. That's my MO with the stuff I do. But I do think it's important, save your money because editors deserve to be paid well. But if they like you and they like the project, they will be able to negotiate. Something that I imparted to my students. If you don't have a lot of money and you're a young cartoonist and you want to do your own work, you can always do a trade. So someone like Tess Fowler, she does these beautiful 4x4 inked illustrations and she sells them for $45. So maybe instead of paying someone to edit her manuscript, she can offer some illustrations. There's a lot to be said about trading comic books, or actually, I've done it too. I had an assistant help me during my class and I paid him cash, but I also offer to edit some of his work as part of the payment. There's nothing wrong with that, especially in these economically challenged times.
Yeah. Brian Weaver wanted to know if how the editing class went, but also wants to know if you're going to do another one.
The editing class was amazing, but it's only because I had the coolest students. There were 67 people, and
wow.
I pretended not to know that because I am not good with public speaking. They made it so easy. So the Saturday class was 2 hours and it was all theory. And we had some break. We had a break. I would do some recordings of interviews with some friends in comics. So I had like a couple, I had pre-recorded interviews with Gilbert Hernandez, for instance. The Sunday classes were Q&A, and it was pretty much like office hours. So it was just me on the couch answering questions rapid fire, and it was so much fun. So I got to know all the students on the Sunday, but I kept pretty strict to the lecture class, because if you want to teach editing comics, you need to teach comics from idea, which is sometimes bad idea, to production. So it was a lot to cover, and I think the class made it great. I had help. I had a technical assistant, Matt Miner, and he was great. He did a great job. I just loved it. I made sure that the class who couldn't attend would receive recorded episodes they could watch in their own time. And I had giveaways. By giveaways, I mean takeaway objects. So I would share my tracking sheets, of how I kept track of all these books. And, lots of other things. So yes, it went well. I'd like to do another one. I think I might look at January. I've got a pretty busy fall. I'm going to be tabling at Thought Bubble in Harrogate, which I can't wait to do.
Hey, that's great. Wonderful.
I'm going to be meeting my team. Imogen Mangle and Laura Hull and Sophie Dodgson will be there. And Philip is coming with me. One of the things I want to tell you, John, just in case, a lot of people have been asking me if they can still get Filth and Grammar. And we will be at Thought Bubble tabling with the expanded edition. So I was fortunate to procure a distribution deal with Lunar Distribution. So
look at that.
If you bought this version as a Kickstarter, it will never be in print like this again. I promise you that. But we have an expanded edition. It's a soft cover. It has a slight alteration to the cover, but there are 8 new pages of content. And this is what I'm doing for my Kickstarter backers. They are getting a PDF of the new content. I don't want them to feel like they have to go and buy a new book, and I don't want them to feel ripped off. So that's a tip for people who are doing Kickstarters and crowdfunding. The people who got you here, the people who got you this beautiful hardcover, don't forget them. Their names are in the back, right?
Yes.
And without them, I wouldn't have this beautiful ribbon bookmark. But those are the people that made it possible. They will get the new content through Kickstarter because I'll be putting it in one of my backer updates. But if anyone's interested in the new edition, it's right now, you can order it. Just go to your local comic book shop, tell them to go to the Lunar catalog and ask for Filth and Grammar. And it will be 176 pages. It will be a soft cover and it will be in stores. I need a drum roll. Thank you. It'll be in stores October 25th because even COVID can't stop me.
Atta girl. Great to hear, buddy. That's fantastic. And also that, like you said, you're taking care of the people that made the project possible. And I think that is something, you see, this is why I love talking to you. I love talking to Palmiati, because you guys have really figured out the really best way to show your appreciation to your Kickstarter backers.
It's with respect. Be respectful, be kind. As my dad used to always say, it doesn't cost a lot to be kind. And the truth is very easy to remember. So my dad raised me in his image, so I can't help but share these maxims because they're true and they work. And what I always say to people is do your own thing. And if, hopefully you'll always find your tribe.
Look at us. We're both We got to blow our noses, everybody. You'll forgive us.
We're the tissue tribe today.
Amen, sister.
But,
Absolutely.
I always say to people, look, superheroes were never my thing. And if you like superheroes, that's cool for you. And
Sure.
I really respect that. But if you like my stuff, you do need to know that Echo and the Bunnymen are on tour right now. And so the reason John and I talk about Brian Ferry is because in 2019, when I was kickstarting Hey Amateur, my gift to myself was a ticket to see Brian Ferry do the Avalon album at the Greek Theater, which is a beautiful outdoor amphitheater. That was my treat. I saved all my money and I went to see the show. I was just by myself because my husband didn't want to go see the show with me. My gift to myself for Fast Times, it's not going to be tough to guess this because I already gave it away, but it's Echo and the Bunnymen. The day after my campaign ends, playing the Forum, I would say what row, but I don't even want to scare the people sitting near me because I'm going to be, again, going to dance, going to sing, because as the Greatest Hits album said, songs to learn and sing, which it gives me liberty to sing when I'm at the show. I'll be there. But I'm going to see Roxy Music with China Clugston Flores in September. And we want to call you as we're getting dressed for the show.
Please do.
We want to chat with you and we want to just, have
get in the mood. God bless you, kids. You're lovely. That's awesome.
We have VIP seats. One of us accidentally hit the wrong button and got VIP seats. We're 9th row.
That's good. I love it. Oh my God. Nobody better to deserve those. That's fantastic.
I'm selling some things on eBay. By the way, I have some really cool Sandman and comic book related memorabilia. And one of those things is right here. And I hope you don't mind if I do this, John. But
no, I zoom in, but I'm glad you're bringing it up. That's great. Look at that. Wow.
So one of the greatest gifts you could ever have as an editor is when an artist says to you, thank you for working with me on my run of the Sandman. Which piece of art would you like to have? So Mark Hempel gave me that honor. And I chose this piece. That's great. I called him and told him that I was going to sell it because I'm a little bit in debt, but I loved him for giving it to me. And he was sad, but he understood and he gave me his blessing. I want someone else to have it. And I also don't want the debt collectors to break my legs.
So is that a stretch goal or is that a...
Oh, no. That's going to be an eBay.
Oh, good.
It's going to be eBay. It's going to go up soon. But John, I knew I needed to get Mark's blessing because I felt bad.
Sure.
I've had it for so many years and it's stunning. But I need to get rid of some things also because I'm overcome with stuff being a pack rat my whole life.
Shell, honestly, I'm Oscar Madison. I mean, you can maybe see a little bit on my shelf behind the couch and stuff. And I can relate. And truly, that's why, I mean, it's always so nice when people at conventions like, can I give you my book? I'm like, can you just send me a PDF, please? I have too much stuff. Yeah. I hear you, buddy.
You become a paper factory. And then also, and then you have these beautiful things. And then sometimes
look at that.
Destroy them.
Yeah.
But I sat on it. This is what COVID did to me. I sat on this beautiful Jill Thompson statue.
Oh.
And it broke. So I feel sad, but it's still cool. It's still cool.
People want to know how to find your eBay stuff. What's your eBay handle?
I haven't listed it yet.
Okay.
But I will absolutely I try to be good about social media.
Yeah.
I will
definitely
let everybody know. I've got some cool things, and I honestly, I treasure these things. I want them to go into homes that are going to appreciate them and love them. So I'm not looking for the rabid collector who wants to make a buck, but I got to make a couple of bucks, or I might get hauled off by Brian Ferry. and Company. In which case, I'll be with the band.
Awesome. Fantastic. Exactly. Just like in Almost Famous. 100%, man. That's fantastic.
Yep.
That's excellent. Jesus. I just bought from Howard Chaykin in Connecticut at Terrificon a page from him, and I've always wanted to get one. And I'm like,
which
what's
one?
that?
Which book? American Flag?
No, it was and I mean I would have been thrilled to get that. I thought I was buying a page from his Hey Kids comics, the new series that he's been doing. And no, it was from a Magneto annual, and I didn't even recognize it was Magneto. But I confess, as much as I love non-superhero comics, I do love superhero comics, and I'm like, oh, it'd be fun to have a Chaykin kind of superhero or super villain page. So it's great. And he's like, yeah, $75. And I'm like, Howard, come on, man. I'm like, I would be glad to give you money. And he's like, yeah, it's fine. And I'm like, all right. And then he just hands it to me. I'm like, Howard, you got to sign it to me. I'm not going to flip this. I want this. I love you, please. So another one of the creators that it's like, I've been reading since the 70s. And it's like, I can't believe that he's happy to see me at conventions and wants to hang out. It means so much. So,
I want to hear your Howard Chaykin impression.
Let me tell you, Pally. All right, great. That's basically it. That HBO show. Oh God, I'm not going to remember it. The show about the porn industry in the 70s in New York. I can't think of the name of it right now.
Yes.
From a couple years ago.
Yes.
And he's like, John, I watched that show, and I swear to God, I see myself in the background. That's how authentic this thing is. And
I do a pretty good Howard Chaykin, because every time I would see
Howard,
he'd be like, darling, you look fabulous. Shelly, it's Howard Chaykin. You look fabulous.
It's so true. Oh God. And like us is a musical fiend and Broadway fiend. And I love that he goes back to New York and oh my God, I saw like 5 plays. It was fantastic. And I'm like,
I'm shocked he doesn't tap dance. I challenged him to a tap dance duel once, and he told me he has 2 left feet, because I can't tell you the number of times he has regaled me with a show tune in my office at DC Comics. We worked together, of course, on American Century and Bike Club back in the day. And
love both.
Hey, we have similar taste in old school theater, Guys and Dolls.
Yes.
South Pacific.
Yes.
Anything Goes.
Oklahoma, Anything Goes. Promises.
Yep.
Come on.
Hey,
absolutely.
But you and I started this chat with Annie, which surprised me. And you revealed your favorite song to be.
I did. My guilty pleasure, the ballad, Maybe. Oh, that just tears my heart out every time I hear that song in the right hands, as far as the singer. It's that's like, oh, that poor kid. I'll adopt you. Don't worry, kid. You're not alone.
That's a tough range.
Oh,
but speaking of tough ranges, I have had so much fun chatting with you, John.
Yeah, buddy, I swear, I know we can keep going for another 4 hours, but I know you gotta see the kid, you gotta see Philip, so I understand.
I see China is now sending me a quick text, and she said, what question should I ask? She's a little late. She's multitasking.
Hi, China.
I'll tell her not to worry, that we'll be back in a month, even if it's just for a mini session with you. But
that'd be great, guys. Seriously, know that.
Sort of like the girls before the big night, out on a date with Brian Ferry. Gail Simone, you're not invited.
Sorry, Gail.
Brian Ferry is ours for the evening. Sorry.
I understand. That's awesome, buddy. As always, seriously, well done. Everybody, Fast Times is the new collection of stories and essays about editing. Shelly's adventures with Vertigo. It really started, as she said, starting around the Kamiko years, and then even going into the early 2000s. So
if I can just say, star-studded, I've got so many contributions from favorite artists and writers over the years. Paul Pope is writing and drawing something for me. He's the best. I love him. He is really still one of my favorite people in comics. Like I said, can count him on one hand. He's right there. Chris Weston did an incredible piece, which I've shown a little bit off. Tess Fowler's doing plenty of art. Imogen Mangle back on amazing sequentials. Laura Hull. Lots of names I'm forgetting, but lots of new people. Lots of people whose indie work you might not be familiar with, but you're going to absolutely flip. Pidge. Please check it out. We've got 7 days remaining on Kickstarter. The Kickstarter is kickstarter.com/projects/sxbond/fast-times. It's my part of the 90s Vertigo revolution. It was crazy. I was raving all day and night at my desk making comics to a Britpop soundtrack, by the way. So it was Suede, it was Pulp, it was Oasis, it was Elastica, all day, all the time, day for night.
I love it, buddy. Absolutely. As always, and I tell you, and it's so cute because she emails me last month or whenever it was. She's like, can I come on? I'm like, seriously, like, are you nuts? Of course you can come on. I said, duh, but it's all right. I'm like, yeah.
Blowing you kisses, and I'm sending you
sweetie.
tissues, and I'm sending you tissues.
Thank you. And truly help her hit these stretch. Listen, yes, I could use some cough drops. Help her hit the stretch goals, everybody, because we're all going to want to see these amazing Vertigo chats that, with all these great Vertigo teams.
Right.
And,
Neil
Gaiman,
Neil Gaiman, Jill Thompson, Sandman team, Invisible's team. I mean, it's just star-studded. And they are very cool people, by the way, because I don't mess with people that aren't cool. So they're nice, they're fun. And John, you're part of the in crowd too.
Thanks, buddy. I feel that way about you. Good Lord. That's funny. All right. New Wave Zombie says blur rules. Absolutely.
Well, that's China.
That's cool.
Wrong. And she's wrong, by the way. Somebody might be taking back her ticket to the Roxy Music.
No. Don't do that to her. She's a good kid.
Sure.
And everyone's, hey, again, my age, everybody's a kid. It's all good. Did real fast for Black Crown, did you work with Stephanie Phillips? I couldn't remember.
No, did not work with Stephanie Phillips.
Because Steph is another, again, in my world, kid that we really hung out a lot at. And she's been on the show many times, but she was in Connecticut and we had a blast and just laughed all weekend.
Oh, cool.
And it's just like, yeah, I mean, honest and truly, it's like, oh, that's really nice. You guys are hanging out with the old middle-aged guy and stuff. And it's not like, all right, stay away and everything. It's like, so it means a lot. But yeah, like, we had a blast. We were karaokeing our asses off. I couldn't find, and I told Howard this because, Howard loves classic, Great American Songbook stuff. And I said, I sang Sinatra. He goes, what'd you do? I said, well, I did Come Fly With Me, which is easy. But I was really looking for Zing Went the Strings of My Heart, because that is my favorite Sinatra song to sing.
Ooh. Well, maybe you and Brian Ferry can do a duet on the next tour.
Indeed.
I'll see what I can do. I'll throw my business card on the stage and see what happens, okay?
Absolutely.
Anyway, it's been fun hanging with you, John. Thank you so much.
Thanks, buddy. Yeah, go be with the family and everything. Shelly Bond, everybody. Fast Times. Great Kickstarter. 7.5 days left.
Woo!
Back this goddamn thing. Absolutely, man. All right, go away. And I'll we don't even have to do the post talk or whatever. You can go play with the family and shit. But everybody, thanks a lot for watching. Here, I don't think I did it on the air, but hey, I just want everyone to know tomorrow, Dan DiDio from formerly from DC Comics, now editor-in-chief and collaborator on Frank Miller Presents. We're going to talk tomorrow, 7:00 Eastern time, and we're going to talk about Frank Miller and everything else. I hope you'll join us. It's going to be great. How about that? All right, everybody. Thank you very much. Stay safe, stay happy, stay healthy. I'm going to try. Oh, what do you got?
Peace out.